Hey everybody, welcome back to the Sheepdog Project. Make sure you go to sheepdogresponse.com, check out the Sheepdog store, check out all the upcoming events that we have, possibly near you, possibly not near you, but it really doesn't matter because when it comes to getting this training, you need to make the effort to take the time off from work, to get on a plane and go and get the training. We don't have 50 mobile training teams. We can't be everywhere at once. And I got to tell you, you know what? I'm going to go off on a little tangent here. So, guys, we're making this as easy for you as we possibly can. But when we have people splitting hairs over the fact that we're teaching a course a whopping 2.5 or 3 hours away from them and they just can't make it, I'm sorry. It's a little bit hard for me to be sensitive to that. You don't realize what it's like. We have instructors all over the country. We're going by planes, trains, and automobiles to get to these locations to provide this training. You know, I can tell you personally, flying across the country, changing flights 3 times, landing in Philadelphia to drive to New Jersey for 2 hours in the dead of night to get up the next morning and teach a course. So I'm sorry, man, but when you guys are complaining that an hour and a half is just too far for you to drive and you're going to have to wait until we're in your backyard to attend one of our courses, that just doesn't cut the mustard with me, man. You guys have to make the effort. We're willing to meet you halfway, so come on. And if you do want us to have training specifically in your area, email us. Email us at info@sheepdogresponse.com and let us know. Say, hey, I've got 20 people at X location, X town. You guys come here, and we're all going to be there. We're all going to show up. If you're willing to make that commitment, and you can guarantee us we're going to get 20 butts in seats, hey, we'll come and put on a course for you. But in the meantime, you're going to have to make the effort. And if you can't make it to one of our courses, we have a plethora of educational videos on the website that you can supplement what you're already doing. And each and every one of you should be going and doing jiu-jitsu 2 to 3 times a week. You should be getting up every day and doing some type of fitness. You should be dry firing a couple times a week and making it to the range probably every other weekend. And if you're not doing that, you're doing yourself, you're doing your family a great disservice. And I'll get off my soapbox. Pleasure today to have with me in the Sheepdog Project studios, second time on the show, Mr. Travis Joyner, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, MMA fighter, police officer, all-around fine American, sheepdog, and many of you have met him at our sheepdog courses. Brother, thank you for being here today.
Yeah, awesome to be here, man. I'm happy to be back on the show. The last time went well, I thought.
It did. That was our basement broadcast. Yeah, that was a pretty good one. We got a lot of good feedback on that one, actually. What I wanted to talk about today, and the reason I wanted to have you on, and I told you a little bit about this when we were texting back and forth, a problem that I've seen, and it's found throughout all levels of sheepdoggery, but you see it in paramedics, you see it in the military, you see it among law enforcement, I'm sure you see it in fire as well, is people carrying too much shit.
Yeah.
You know? And no amount of fitness that you do, if you're just going to defeat being physically fit by then hampering yourself by carrying too much stuff, carrying the wrong stuff, or carrying it in the wrong configuration, you're doing yourself a great disservice.
Yeah.
So I thought we could talk about that a little bit, talk about what you carry on your duty belt, what you carry in your car, what are some of the things you're mandated to carry that if we waved a magic wand tomorrow and you were chief of police that you would do away with, and some things you think people aren't carrying that they need to carry, accessibility, where people need to have stuff and things like that. I thought, obviously, you have the expertise in law enforcement. I have none of that. We'll talk about everything, but I thought we'd start off with that. So what's the number one thing that you see when you're at a morning squad brief or something like that, and you look around the room, what's the number one thing you see on other officers' belts that you're like, I can't believe you're carrying that. That's ridiculous. And what's the number one thing you see that I can't believe you're not carrying X?
Yeah, that's when you look at the belt, the main thing I pick up on there is stuff that might be handy to have, but you don't really need it quickly.
Right.
You don't really need it.
Nice to have versus necessity.
Correct. Like, when I look at something like a multi-tool or my pager, which we actually, believe it or not, still carry pagers here in 2018.
Yeah.
But, there's things that you may need that you could keep in a bag, that you could keep in your car, that doesn't necessarily need to take up real estate and add weight on your vest.
Right.
Or I'm sorry, on your belt.
Right.
That's the number one thing. It's just little stuff. As far as what people don't carry, I think the number of officers that still don't carry tourniquets in 2018 is pretty shocking.
Yeah, and that's
pretty shocking.
That's scary to me. And I notice I have a neighbor who's in Austin PD, and he is largely, and you know who he is. He's largely in a supervisory role, and that was his thing. Is the department doesn't give us enough tourniquets to go around. So the guys who are out there on the street making contact, they're the ones that need to have them. But to me, I think every police officer, regardless of whether they're in that supervisory role or not, needs to carry them. Quite frankly, because not only do you have a duty to intercede, you might be on the way home gassing up and see something go down and you have to intercede, and also you're a target.
Absolutely.
So for that reason and that reason alone, you need to have that piece of life-saving equipment on you.
Yeah, it's. If it was up to me, and I'm sure you feel the same, everyone would carry one, but especially if you're carrying a gun, you're carrying a badge, it should be going along with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So starting in the front of your belt and going around, let's talk about what you would have on it on a typical day.
Are we talking like plain clothes, just me walking around?
Well, we'll do both. So let's talk duty belt first, and then we'll talk plain clothes.
So in a patrol uniform, in a marked unit in that type of setting, are what we call Sam Browns, as I'm going to have my duty weapon with a tack light on it.
Okay.
I'm going to have 2 spare magazines on the belt. I'm going to have 2 sets of handcuffs, 1 set of hinge cuffs, 1 set of chain cuffs, and then I'm going to have a radio. And then we have to carry 3 less lethal options, which are going to be a taser, a baton, and pepper spray.
So you're mandated to carry 3 less lethal options.
Correct.
I find that very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't, how do you feel about that?
My personal feeling is you could probably limit it to 2.
Yeah, I do too.
But a lot of that goes with the fact that if you're comfortable with your hands and you're comfortable with going hands-on and dealing with people, that's a really strong option in and of itself. And, when those times when you need distance standoff, dealing with someone, probably 2 in most cases. 3 is kind of giving you a lot to think about.
Yeah, I think it does too. And if you think about, are people spending... today I'm only going to do drills where I go for my baton, or today I'm only going to do drills where I go for my pepper spray, or I'm only going to do drills where I only go for my taser, because you only building those pathways of, I hate to use the term muscle memory because it's a muscles don't have a lot to do with it, but I'm gonna use that for the purpose of this because everybody knows what I'm talking about when I say that. So building that muscle memory, building those neural pathways. Yeah. You can only it's finite, and you only have so much time.
Correct.
So we already know if you're already not spending enough time, and almost everybody, unless you're Jeremiah Futch or Travis Lloyd or Tim Kennedy, is not spending enough time drilling with that pistol already. Yeah. So now you're adding 3 more requirements on top of it. Let me ask you this. So this is my opinion on pepper spray. I think pepper spray in a woman's purse, not to sound like a sexist, but I think that's a good thing because they want standoff, they want to control that spray space,
right?
And they want to spray and run type thing. I think the huge downside to carrying any type of pepper spray type thing as a law enforcement officer is if that person warranted getting pepper sprayed, then at some point they're going into custody, which means me putting hands on them is at most 2 or 3 steps down the road.
Right.
Even if they say, hey, I totally give up and I'm going to get on my knees and you're going to cuff me. Now they've got pepper spray on them. I'm having to get into the space and inhale it myself. I'm having to put them in my cruiser where I'm going to inhale it. I think from a law enforcement point of view, pepper spray is terrible. But that's as the layman, that's my opinion. What do you think about that?
Yeah. In 2018, where tasers have come to the forefront. Again, the standoff that you get with pepper spray, where 20 years ago that might have been an advantage.
Right.
What we've seen is most officers are going to go to a taser,
right,
so that they don't have to deal with that secondary exposure.
With that's imminent.
Right.
Yeah.
Really the thing now is, you could make an argument for it for large scale crowd control, those type situations. But as far as an individual officer dealing with an individual suspect, we don't see it used a whole lot.
Well, let's talk about it. So let's talk about it from the point of view of large scale crowd control. And you mentioned, a multi-tool. I definitely want one in my little go bag on the front seat of my cruiser. Because hey, I'm out of the cruiser. I encountered a situation. Boy, my Gerber would be real handy in this situation. I'm going to walk right back over and get it, right? Because it's not something I need in the next 5 seconds.
Right.
It's very unusual. You got to open a Copenhagen can or a bottle, or a can of peas in the next 5 to 7 seconds, right? Well, kind of the same is true with that crowd control. Hey, we're moving in. Oh, okay, this type of situation. Now I'm going to the trunk of my car. I'm getting the big fire extinguisher size pepper spray. Or my favorite is the paintball gun with the dried habanero. Those are awesome because you can target. Hey, there's that.
Those are nasty.
There's that vegan ponytail son of a bitch causing all the problem right there. Not to make a stereotype, but boom.
Yeah.
Put one right on his forehead, and you've neutralized the situation. But no, you're right. I don't think again you can. Your primary muscle memory, pistol or taser, is this a lethal or non-lethal situation? Oh, now he's in a very close-in situation, or I'm trying to get him off of somebody. Or do you guys what's your guys' policy on tasing canines, tasing a dog if a dog is on somebody?
Yeah, we can use tasers on aggressive dogs.
Yeah,
animals.
would you preferentially tase a dog or just try to whack it on the flank with your billy club, or would a situation would dictate?
It's situational dependent. Yeah. They show us methods, of using batons to in certain ways on dogs, using tasers.
Yeah.
Same thing with pepper spray. Some people will try and use it.
Yeah.
That seems to be hit or miss with canines on whether they care or not about that.
I don't think. I think. I mean, they used to say if you spray vinegar on a cat, they won't climb the drapes, and I've seen from personal experience that's not true. Did they teach you that if you stick your finger in the dog's butt, he'll let go?
They didn't show us that.
That's the urban legend that I always hear.
Never tried that one.
Yeah, I don't think it's true from a physiological standpoint, but I just wanted to see if they were teaching that. I think I saw that in the movie Ted. So we're kind of in agreement. Like if you and I were making policy, we would tell people probably 2 would be better. And probably, I would definitely, if somebody was on PCP, I would much rather have a taser because you can fight through. I've been pepper sprayed and I've been CS gassed. It's not comfortable, but you can fight through it.
It's pain.
Yeah. The thing about a taser, and we've all seen videos of people fighting through a taser too, but to an extent, that's not as voluntary. Because if those volts are contracting your muscles for you, sometimes it's not a question of whether you were disinhibited or not. You may not be able to fight through it. And I think the taser is certainly more reliable than the pepper spray. Although, we all know that there have been some deaths associated with tasers. Yeah. Either directly from the current or from the fall that happens afterwards. And I understand the problem with that. But I mean, you could just because we haven't pepper sprayed somebody and they, oh my God, and run in front of a Mack truck. Those
things happen too.
That can happen too. I mean, they can run off of a wall. They could run into traffic. They could have an anaphylactic reaction. I've seen people come in with some pretty severe. This was it's funny because ACL is getting ready to go on right now. This was actually ACL quite a few years ago. That I saw somebody get brought in with a terrible allergic reaction to me, and they had been pepper sprayed kind of ancillary that they were actually trying to hold this person down.
And they got
caught it. And
got some of the exposure.
Yeah,
too.
Got some secondary exposure. But yeah, I just think that's a bad idea. If you think it's not something we ever carried in combat. even when we had very restrictive ROE that we want to go in and we want to get people out, we would never dream on target of pepper spraying somebody and then wrapping up with them and grappling with them
Right.
and rubbing all in that ourselves. 'Cause that's really unpleasant, that secondary exposure, like you said.
Terrible.
Yeah. What are some things that you carry, you defer off of your belt, and you always have with you in your cruiser?
Well, there's a lot that's going to be in the car. You know, I'm sure you're going to hit up, medical equipment. I always try and keep more in my car in a bag, obviously, than I'm going to have on me. Rifle, we typically can't and don't carry long gun, so I'm going to have that. Depending on, where you're at and what you're doing, breaching tools, kind of like from a first responder point of view.
Sure.
And then just a lot of paperwork.
Yeah.
A lot of paperwork. Other than that, you're going to have things just as a street officer dealing with people, extra gloves, hand sanitizer, just your average cop patrol bag is going to have a lot of stuff like that.
But it sounds like you've got the right approach in the point that, you're going to put on one set of gloves for an encounter situation.
Right. And then if I need more, there's a box.
There's a box. And you're not going to stop in the middle of that and hand sanitize. So that's something that obviously doesn't need to be. And there's a saying, I actually don't think this first came up in the military. I think competition bicyclists, I think, were the ones who first came up with this, was ounces equal pounds and pounds equal pain. So you talk about all the stuff we're already carrying on their belt. Now if you have 2 extra set of gloves and some hand sanitizer in a cargo pocket, that seems minuscule, but you add the cell phone and the wallet and the pager you talked about and your car keys and everything else to that. This is starting to add up, and it's starting to make you uneven on one side or the other and unwieldy. When you talk about the Sam Brown belt, do you guys carry the actual with the strap, the traditional Sam Brown belt, or you're just calling
some
it
officers do have the suspenders with them, but the most don't.
Yeah,
it's just a belt with keepers on an inner belt.
Yeah. What have you noticed that those who tend to wear it with the suspenders? I'm guessing they probably are carrying even more.
I'm trying to think. There's only a handful that I've seen, actually carrying it here locally. But, all our guys are loaded down so much. Yeah. It's kind of hard to tell just at a glance.
You mentioned carrying 2 sets of handcuffs. Tell me why, because that's something I don't understand.
Well, that's another requirement.
Okay.
So there's a couple aspects to that. So we carry hinge cuffs and chain cuffs. So hinge cuffs are what I prefer to use for cuffing most people. But if you have a smaller female or a small-wristed male, then those hinge cuffs, sometimes they can slip them. Like they're just not small enough to cuff them.
And this is Austin, so there's a lot of small-wristed males.
We have a lot of, that going on. So that's another thing. That's just a requirement.
Yeah.
So you have to have 2 cuffs on you.
Yeah. Interesting. Because I've always thought, when I see that, I've always thought to myself, well, how much does a flex cuff weigh compared to how much a set of handcuffs weighs?
Yeah. And the same thought on that, I have seen in years past, officers that just carried one and then they had some more in their car, right, if they needed them.
I think that's how I would want to do it. Just because that's, especially a set of hinge cuffs, that's not an insignificant amount of weight. That's if you're,
well, like you said, it's little things add up, especially when it's all resting on your hips for 10 hours.
Now you have a tack light on your weapon. Do you have another flashlight on your belt, or just the light that's on your
yes, I carry a light on my belt too. Okay. I forgot about that.
Okay. All right. So how much have you ever weighed your belt? Do you know how much it weighs?
Oh, it's over 20 pounds.
Yeah, easy, I would say. Yeah. Yeah, just with the sidearm, with the mags, you're talking about a good amount of weight right there. And everything that you talk about.
You add in the vest, you add in all that.
Yeah. So let's talk about, and you're talking about your ballistic vest, but let's talk about, we'll talk about the option that some police departments have and that military police have of carrying a vest as opposed to carrying a belt. Before we talk about that specifically, I want to, in the military, in the 1980s, we had the traditional load-bearing equipment that was a pistol belt with a set of suspenders. The standard pretty much was you carried 2 1-quart canteens of water, 2 ammo pouches on there. Each would carry 3 30-round mags. Usually you would carry 2 first aid pouches. One was for first aid, and one carried your compass in it. And this was the days before comprehensive individual first aid kits.
Yeah.
And then in the early 90s, we went to the load-bearing vests that came out. And the load-bearing vests had the advantage of they actually could carry those same 6 magazines on the vest. So ideally, you could carry just a pistol belt with your water on it and maybe some other stuff that you needed. There was even 2 grenade pouches right there.
Okay. Yeah, they don't let us carry those.
They don't let you carry grenades, which I think is a travesty, actually. But what pretty much all of us did, at least in the SF community, is we would go ahead and put those 6-round or 2 3-round ammo pouches, or 3 magazine rather, ammo pouches on a belt, and we would still carry our magazines on the belt. And then most people carried stuff that they needed up there on the vest.
Yeah.
Like I was on a reconnaissance team, so I had a signals pocket that had a signal flare, a pen gun signal flare, and a cut down VS-17 panel in one pocket. I had another pocket that was a survival pocket, so I had like a mini survival kit in that. Typically, my map, if I had a small map, would roll up in another one. I had different ways that I would configure it because I was on it, like I said, because I was on a reconnaissance team. I had one company commander try to tell me that no, you should carry, instead of 210 rounds, you should carry 420 rounds because now you have the capability to carry 420 rounds. And he could never give me an adequate explanation as to why that was.
Yeah.
But he was convinced that you needed to carry 420 rounds. And the problem that this illustrates is when you give somebody the ability to carry more stuff, instead of redistributing the stuff they were carrying in a better configuration and giving their body a break, they just tend to carry more stuff.
Yeah, not solving the problem that it was intended to.
Is that what you've seen out of people that are carrying some configuration of tactical vests, kind of something like that?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a natural tendency for that to happen. You know, there's a push in law enforcement to go to the, not everywhere, but, to kind of get away from the traditional look of the belt and go towards the, load-bearing vests or the external carriers, they call them.
Yeah.
And the idea being that you take a lot of that weight that's around your hips that can, as you're well aware, I'm sure, cause some issues in the long run.
Yeah.
Get it up, higher on the body, distribute it a little better. But I'm sure that people tend to just add a little more gear.
Yeah.
And those new pockets and those new handles and those new spots,
I do think it's something that police departments should consider going to. There is and I'm not an orthopedist, so I don't remember the name. I can maybe Google it here in a little bit. There's a specific lower extremity neurological problem that has a law enforcement name attached to it because it's specifically related. Like when it was first diagnosed in medicine, it was noticed in police officers wearing a heavy-duty belt on their pistol side, that they were getting a specific nerve entrapment on that side because of the repeated weight bearing. So undoubtedly it causes a lot of problems, and the shoulders are better able to carry that weight. We all know that, but like you said, that means that people are going to go from carrying 25 pounds of gear to 35 pounds of gear because initially they're going to feel like it's easier, and they're going to. If you give somebody more pockets, they want to fill those pockets. Yeah. You give somebody a bigger rucksack, they want to put more shit in their bigger rucksack.
More room.
Yeah, that's a problem. I know in Ranger Regiment, a lot of the medics clamored to get a different bag because they were at the point where they were going on the objective with their M9 or their NAR4 bags, which are basically the same bag, filled to the point that the zippers just wanted to burst open.
Wow.
And they're like, we need a bigger bag. We need a bigger bag. Finally, they got the clearance from the chain. All right, you guys can all get a bigger bag, but don't put more stuff in it. And to keep them honest, they weighed everybody's bag on the last day that they had their old bags. And then they waited 2 months and weighed everybody's bag again. And everybody had gone up 10 pounds. And it's like, sure enough, you did it.
Yeah.
You did it. You started carrying more fluid. You started carrying more SAM splints, whatever it is, more whatever. You did exactly what we told you not to do.
Yeah.
And now the zippers are bulging on these.
Yeah.
What do you, on a day that you're in plain clothes, what are you carrying on your person?
Yeah. So plain clothes, gonna have a gun still. Usually one spare magazine. Mm-hmm. Not always. It depends on the gun I'm carrying. If I have like a small single stack, like I have a Car PM9, usually I'll carry a spare magazine with that. If I have a full-size gun, kind of depending on where I'm at, what I'm doing. If I'm at work, I'll have a spare magazine. A tourniquet, always. A knife, folding knife with a seatbelt cutter, window brake. And then just wallet, credentials. If it's night, I'll have a small flashlight.
Okay. What is your opinion? This has to do a little bit more with people in their duty uniform, and I told you in advance that this was something I wanted to bring up. What do you think the prevalence is of police officers carrying 2 firearms on their person? And what is the reasoning that you've most commonly heard behind doing that?
Yeah, so I'd say right now, I mean, I don't have any actual research on what the actual number is.
Yeah, just anecdotally.
But anecdotally, I would put it just based off what I see at maybe 20 to 30% carrying.
That's a lot.
A backup gun.
Yeah.
Or a secondary or a second gun. I think when you ask why, if you look at the history of it, if you look at the culture of policing, police carried revolvers.
I was going to say this goes back to the L. Frame Smith days.
Yes, and I haven't been around that long, and when I was a rookie, we still had officers carrying revolvers.
Yeah.
You'll still see them every now and then, but it's pretty rare. But in the grand scheme, it hasn't been that long since some people stopped carrying revolvers. And the thought process back then was, if I have to reload this thing in a fight, it's probably just faster to grab a second gun.
Which is why it was called the New York Reload.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that's the history of it, why you have it. And, there's different schools of thought. I'd say if you ask most people, they're going to give you 2 scenarios, because I think we could agree now that from most places of concealment, it's not going to be faster to draw a secondary gun than to reload a semi-automatic handgun as long as you're proficient in reloading.
Absolutely not.
So
there's no way.
That's not really an issue anymore. I think you would find 2 answers. One is that if my gun either breaks, jams, runs out of ammo, etc., I have another one. Or if I am fighting and I am fighting over my gun, or my gun is taken, then I'm going to access my second gun and use it.
Right. How many of and you've done this quite a bit more than I have. I've even noticed, and you and I have grappled together, so you can attest to the fact that I am below average in my grappling abilities.
No.
At least for the circle that we run in. But I'm not you. I'm not Dennis. I'm not Tim. I'm not Chris or any of these other guys. I have been able in rolling in our law enforcement classes to disarm officers and turn their own guns back on them, even at my level of ability. And that's because I have a little bit more. They have more pistol carrying experience than I do. I've got a little bit more grappling experience than they do, which still isn't a lot in my opinion. But what I'm wondering is, how many of these guys have ever trained, or girls have ever trained, okay, you got my primary away from me. Now in the course of the fight, now I'm going to go for my secondary. And I'd be willing to bet that no matter where their secondary is, if I've taken your primary, I can definitely shoot you with your primary before you can get to that secondary.
Yeah. I think if you put that on a clock,
Yeah.
if someone already has control of your gun, then trying to access a secondary gun, they're going to be faster to pull a trigger for sure.
And we also know, and we've noticed this when we teach it too, is that the moment I start to get your gun away from you, you are so caught up on that. Oh my God, my gun's getting taken away, that you might forget. You might have been on the verge of getting superior position. You forget it.
Yeah.
You might be on the verge of getting away. You forget it. I've noticed that they get so much tunnel vision on that.
Oh yeah.
That I'm able to then manipulate them in other ways very, very easily. You know, I got one guy was so caught up. He actually totally had me on my back in top half guard, and I reached around his waist and put my hand on his weapon, and he got so locked down on it that he committed both of his arms, and I bump swept him so ridiculously easy, and then had him pinned on his own firearm so he couldn't draw it. So then basically he was at my mercy. And I don't think, you know, they're thinking about going for that secondary weapon, but honestly, I think when the rubber meets the road, they're going to be so, oh my God, my primary's getting taken away. They're going to have both hands on it, and they're not going to have the presence of mind to go for that secondary.
Yeah, well, you know, we talk about, you know, there's a lot of stuff that you can theorize about, right? That you can, this is what I would do or wouldn't do. You know, as you know, we do a lot of fighting over weapons, and it's not complicated, but it's very difficult to do because it requires your mind to do two things. And we were just talking about this in the North Carolina course, and you just hit it head on. Cops tend to focus just on controlling the weapon and not on controlling position or dominating position. So doing those two things at once is very difficult to do. Having the ability to maintain control of the weapon, but also fight the positional fight, because so much training has been taught for so long to just simply control the weapon, the weapon. Well, if you're just controlling the weapon, eventually I'm going to start solving that problem by positioning or by striking or by other things. So add in that a third dynamic of I have to control the weapon, I have to dominate position, and now I have to basically violate one of the principal rules, which is keeping two hands on the weapon, right? To access another location, I'm assuming is going to be concealed, because if we're not carrying a backup gun in concealment, then that creates a whole nother issue of having to retain two guns or not, you know.
Good luck with that. Yeah. I think I'm guessing the most common is probably ankle.
Yeah, I see vest and ankle.
Yeah. Some people, because I know in your duty shirts, even though a lot of times they look like buttons, they're actually snaps.
Zippers,
or
zippers or snaps.
Right, so they can carry, and there's a couple of really good, actually, undergarments out there that you can carry it pretty accessible. And I know for female officers, there's a couple of sports bras that will carry one right in the middle that's actually pretty quick to draw from what I've seen. But yeah, again, it's not, you know, if you're already lost a positional fight and now on top of everything else you've lost a weapon, if I've mounted you and I have taken your primary away, good luck getting to something else before I can put two in your head. I mean, it's I think a lot. I understand. You've said this phrase multiple times throughout this, and I've seen it in the military arena, in the law enforcement arena, in paramedics, firefighters. To me, the two nastiest words are "what if," because I could what if myself into looking like Master Chief from Halo. I mean, you can just what if yourself all day long. What if I'm chasing somebody? Well, what if I'm chasing somebody across a rooftop and they jump across? Well, then I need a grappling hook.
Yeah.
Well, am I going to carry a grappling hook? No. You know, is there a 1 in 10,000 chance that could happen to me? Yeah. Should I carry a grappling hook for that? No, I'm not going to carry a grappling hook for that.
Because it's a trade-off, right?
Yeah, it's a trade-off.
If carrying extra things or carrying gear didn't have a trade-off, right, then it wouldn't matter. And we'd carry as much as we could. But as you talked about, the mobility issues, the weight issues, the retention issues are all things that, you know, assets and liabilities, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think this is where, in my opinion, this is where this applies to everything, but we're talking about specifically about law enforcement now. So individual police officers and agencies, I think, should keep statistics on a yearly basis. They should look, as 2018 closes out, they should say, how many instances did we have where officers needed 2 sets of handcuffs? In those instances, could one of them have been a set of flex cuffs until they went to their car and then changed out? Or was it absolutely they were in a backyard pursuit or arrived at the family barbecue force on force that we've all seen a million times, right?
Oh, yeah.
And had to line up cousins on both sides cuffed. And everybody used all their handcuffs. How many times do we have that? We have a saying, or a term that we use in medicine, rather, called what's the number needed to treat? How many times, if you figure you have 100 police officers carrying 2 sets of cuffs, how often are they going to use those? Is the juice worth the squeeze? And I think you need to look at every piece of gear you're carrying from that point of view. Yeah, absolutely. There's some, if you've had a 20-year career and you've never drawn your sidearm, that doesn't mean you get to go out the door without your sidearm, right? Because that's going to be a deal breaker.
Right.
That's it. You absolutely have to have that. But if it's a bunch of other nice to carry, look at why am I carrying this and what's the downside if I don't? Is it a potential loss of life or limb? Well, that's a big deal. Is it a little bit of a pain in the ass while I got to go to my car and get something or wait for another officer? Well, maybe that's a little bit different. How many officers are carrying? I know it used to be that all officers were carrying some type of barrier mask if they had to give CPR mouth to mouth.
I don't
see those as much
I don't
anymore.
carry one like on me. Same thing. I have one in my bag.
Yeah, and we're doing the gospel is hands only CPR now.
Yeah.
Anyway, but again, that was one point in time that was something that you kept seeing on officers' belts. Was that?
I haven't seen that a lot locally, but I'm sure there's still some areas where.
Let's jump back to that secondary firearm a little bit, because I know that some people are listening to this who 100% I know are in the camp that they're carrying it. So, and you mentioned the reasons that people give. So, I notice a lot of the reasons that people give are reasons that your own inattention would put you there. So some of those being situational, like I allowed myself to get into, not this was, we went to ground and we were grappling over it because it's a retention holster and I've trained in that. But, I was totally focused on something over here and a bystander grabbed my weapon and which most of the retention holsters that most departments are requiring, that shouldn't really be an issue anyway.
Yeah. The I can't speak for everyone across the nation, but as a whole, law enforcement holsters in the last few years have gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
With like the Safari Land ALSs. And 20 years ago when you had a leather thumb snap holster, someone literally just yanking your gun off your hip was a pretty realistic possibility.
Very. Yeah.
If you have a level 3 Safari Land, someone's going to have a hard time.
Yeah.
Unless you're not fighting.
Yeah.
To remove that thing.
Yeah. They're going to go to yank that.
Yeah, like
firearm.
It's more likely to break off of the belt than it is to come out of that holster. I was
going to say, it's going to yank you.
Yeah.
They're going to be pulling you around. And that's one thing that we noted in Iraq. There was a time period in Iraq where everybody got caught up on, everybody wanted to carry that center of their chest plate.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that had to do with we were doing a lot of vehicular stuff in Iraq. And it also just plain became cool for a while, because I noticed a lot of people that really had no business even carrying a secondary were doing it. But what pretty much everybody was doing it in some type of retention. A lot of those were the Black Hawk retention.
Yeah, the Serpas.
Yeah, the Serpas, which have a lot of innate problems that I won't get into. Like one rock can kill you if it gets in there. But the bad guys didn't know how to work the retention holsters necessarily, but they knew that a guy was hovering over them with hey, grab my pistol. And we called it the gringo handle for a while. Obviously they don't call us gringos, they call us other names, but it's like, I'm going to grab you by this and I think I'm going to get it, but I'm not, but I am going to be able to pull you all around the room by it, type thing. What do you think about the people that say, well, this, in case in case my gun jams, or in case. Is that somebody in my? Again, I'm not a law enforcement officer, but when I hear that, what that says to me is, you need to spend another 30 minutes on the range every Saturday clearing malfunctions.
Yeah, I think, unless it's a catastrophic failure,
Yeah.
You should know how to clear double feeds and, stovepipes and your typical malfunctions. And part of this, again, comes down to, like you said, taking a realistic assessment of where you're at and what you're doing. If you look at a city like the one we're in, typically the officers here, it's not that they're never by themselves, but a lot of the times there is more than one. There are multiple officers there. If not, there's officers close. The officer working in that area, probably their likelihood of needing one versus, let's say, I'm a DPS trooper out in the Panhandle and backup is an hour away.
Right.
So if I have some type of catastrophic malfunction or something really goes wrong, backup is like an hour away. Like those two, even though they're both police officers, what they may need or not need are completely different, right?
Yeah.
So, taking that honest assessment of, do you work with a partner? Are you with someone? How far is backup? Things like that to consider.
That's prior to the global war on terror. Whenever we practiced CQB, you had a long gun and you had a sidearm. Yeah. And one of the big things that we practice all the time was the transition. You run a click either because you have a malfunction or you went dry, and you transition to that sidearm. And then we found out very quickly in the first couple of years of GWAT that nobody was getting to a situation where they were transitioning. It just wasn't happening.
Yeah.
Because you were doing TAC mag reloads when you were supposed to, number one, so you weren't going to run dry. Our weapons were working just fine, so we weren't having the malfunction issue. And then in those rare occasions when somebody did end up on a click, the other three guys in the room were there.
Yeah.
And they were taking care of it. So nobody was transitioning. So I knew a lot of operators who actually just stopped. They're like, hey, to me, it's more important. We're doing an offset and we're running to target. So to me, it's more important to be as light as possible.
Yeah.
And I saw operators going out in both theaters where they'd have a mag in the gun and one mag in the vest. And I'm like, don't you think that's a little bit light? And they're like, hey, Doc, this target's been watched for days. Okay. I'm carrying 230 rounds. I'm carrying 60 rounds. 100% confident that with 60 rounds, I can kill 30 people. I can double tap 30 people. We've been watching this target for days. There's 8 people on it. And I got all my buddies with me.
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident we got enough rounds.
Yeah.
I'm good. And because what they found out early on, and this was in the higher tier units, is that they were going out with these heavy loads on target and coming back, and everybody fired less than a mag because they were hitting everything they aimed at. They were only shooting when they had a target.
Yeah.
Some guys were coming back, hadn't fired around, and the guys who were the number 1, number 2 man most of the time were firing a mag, maybe 2 mags, and that was it. Now in the conventional units, guys were doing ridiculous. I've heard some pretty ridiculous stories about, I was told to suppress a corner, so I fired 200 rounds at that corner.
Yeah.
What were you shooting at? At the corner. Was there anybody sticking their head around the corner? No, I was told to shoot at the corner. So I fired 200 rounds at the corner or at the culvert, at
Problem
the ditch.
solved.
Yeah, or whatever. It's like, and that's something that I heard years ago, way back at about the same time I told you that one company commander wanted us to carry 420 rounds. If you carry 420 rounds, you're gonna find a way to need 420 rounds. You're going to need exactly the number of rounds you carry.
Well, on the other end, look at the police. When officers carried a 6-shot revolver, they're probably pretty careful with taking that shot. Now we have 17, 18 round magazines, and officers find a way to use 17 or 18 rounds.
Well, what was that one? There was one just in the last couple of years. The total I don't remember how many officers were. Well, there've been a couple actually. I know there was the one with the guy in the backyard of his own grandmother's house that he was burglarizing cars.
Yeah.
And they thought his cell phone was a gun.
Yeah.
I want to say they fired 40 something rounds.
Yeah, I mean, if you take, look at it. If you take 2 or 3 officers, say 3, and the rate of fire of a Glock or an M&P or whatever, and 3 to 5 seconds, 3 of them firing. I mean, it's going to be a lot of rounds.
Yeah. Well, and you should fire until the threat is neutralized. And sometimes a guy's been dead, he just hasn't fallen down yet.
Yeah.
And you can get 5 to 10 more rounds in him before he goes down.
Yeah, and like you said, it goes back to training. Like there are times, there's those crazy examples. I mean, you look the North Hollywood shootout, or an officer that just gets into a really prolonged gunfight, on the side of a highway. Like those things happen, and you have to take those into account with how much ammo you carry. But you also have to do your due diligence to become a better shooter. All of us, to make quality hits.
If the North Hollywood shootout occurred today under the exact same circumstances, all the cops would have died because where they got their guns.
The gun store.
They went and broke into a gun store.
And it's gone now.
Now they couldn't do that.
They don't allow those there.
In California. I'm anticipating that police in California have kind of up-armed themselves since then.
Yeah, that was a changing point for...
That was, yeah, because I know that in places like... I've worked pretty extensively with San Diego PD, and I know that they have radically changed that, and because of some other things, they radically changed what the typical patrol officer was carrying in his trunk. Not just the, I think they're back to calling it SWAT now. They were calling it SRT at the time, but not just what they were carrying, but what everybody was carrying changed pretty drastically.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You have a car you can carry. You can have a lot of extra weight in your car that in the grand scheme isn't going to cost you a whole lot, right?
Yeah.
A little more gas, maybe a little slower, but, we can keep a lot of gear in those trunks.
Yeah. One of the problems that I have, and I don't, we're about good on time, and we've covered a lot of good stuff specifically about law enforcement, but I do want to throw a little bit of this in there. One thing I've noticed with paramedics, you got this whole ambulance, a lot of great stuff in it. There's always only one go back. There's always only one getting out of the ambulance bag.
Yeah.
It's not typically, and some departments are different. Typically, it doesn't matter whether you're going in a house for an old lady with chest pain or you're walking up to a motor vehicle collision.
It's the same bag.
It's the same bag. And there's a lot of shit in there that you don't like. I don't care. I would never, giving my choice, I would never be carrying a heart monitor or a defibrillator up to a motor vehicle collision. I'm not, unless the person had a massive MI and they're in VFib arrest, and that's what caused the motor vehicle collision, which is going to be one in I don't know how many tens of thousands, it's not going to matter. I wouldn't carry an oxygen cylinder up to a motor vehicle collision. Number one, there's a risk of explosion. Number two, the only time I really care if somebody has oxygen on board in a traumatic situation is in the case of a head injury, and it can absolutely stay in the ambulance until they get in the ambulance. So the fact that those kits are always the same, that's something that's always, the big go bags, and paramedic go bags have gotten so much larger because, again, they've what-if'd themselves. There's everything in there to treat everything from they need Narcan to they took too much insulin and didn't eat, and I've got all my D50 ampules in here, to my my ACLS drugs, my RSI kit and my intubation stuff, my oxygen cylinder. All of that is in there, and you don't need that for every situation. And really, you should, as a minimum, I think they should have a medical bag that they go with and a trauma bag that they go with.
Yeah, separate things.
Yeah, they should, as a minimum, those two things. Because the trauma bag could be quite a bit lighter, and it needs to, because it's not. So if I'm answering a medical call, I'm probably answering it at an address, and I'm pulling up to the curb or in the driveway, and I'm walking 20 or 30 feet into the door. If I'm answering a trauma call, my accessibility might be limited to the fact that I'm getting out and I'm running or walking that last bit of it to get up there, and I'm working in and around whatever it might be, vehicles, cave-in of a building, a restaurant where a bomb went off. Imagine if on a busy Saturday night in 6th Street during the ROT rally or Austin City Limits or something like that, if somebody decided to set off a bomb in the billiard hall or one of the bars or something like that, with all that humanity in the street, and if they had little temporary vending booths or whatever, the ambulance might be stopped on Congress, and you're running all that way.
Yeah.
So if it's a trauma, you should have what you need for trauma. I shouldn't have ampules of D50. I shouldn't have cardiac drugs. I shouldn't have a cardiac monitor, because honestly, I don't care. The problem is there's a lot of people on high, and I'm seeing this come back into the military again. They want to push monitoring devices down to the lowest level. And I literally had somebody say this to me in a meeting, that no, we want to know when somebody gets a tourniquet applied to their arm on the Hindu Kush, in the Hindu Kush of Afghanistan, a little light comes on a screen at Randolph Air Force Base, and we know exactly where that casualty is and what his blood pressure is and what his heart rate is, and we're going to track him all the way throughout. And I'm like, why? Why does that matter? And they're like, well, it matters for the data. I'm like, there's other ways to get that data. And I'm getting off on a tangent here, but and I know a lot of people, some of the people that listen to this are in decision-making positions, in positions of influence. But it really is a systemic problem. And it's the people in the higher positions. I was the one that, as a squad leader, that had to walk the ranks of my men and go, no, you're not carrying a tomahawk. Yes, I know it looks cool. It's too heavy. Okay, we're walking 20 miles tonight. You're not carrying a tomahawk. All right? You're not carrying this. You're not no. That scene in Platoon, you're carrying too much gear, troop. And he's got a novel in there and a sleeping bag and a mess kit and all this other shit. So the people in charge need to be policing up, making air quotes, their people, and going through the ranks and going, you're carrying too much shit. You need to not carry this, not carry that. They need to not be adding to it. That's my opinion. I think that's an important supervisory job, is to make sure your people aren't carrying, they're carrying the right stuff. They're not carrying. So in other words, it's 2018. I'm sorry. You need to give up your revolver. All right. Nobody should be carrying. I'm sorry. It is what it is. Give up your revolver. All right. And we need to be carrying smaller, lighter loads. I do think everybody needs to go to a vest. I know it's not traditional looking, but hey, it's 2018. Things are different now. Policing is different now.
Oh yeah.
Policing is way different now. And we could do a whole show on this. In fact, I think we should at some point. The amount, the same argument that I hear on, well, I can't carry an IFAC because I'm already carrying too much stuff. I also hear the argument, I can't keep current on that training because I'm already I'm already a social worker, a marriage counselor, a psychologist.
Oh yeah.
I'm already a drug treatment counselor. I'm all these other things. And that's fine. But honestly, I think what needs to happen is we need to have all those resources, all the experts on that need to be on 20. And it doesn't matter if it's 2:00 in the morning. If you're in somebody's living room and that's what's needed, you should have a number to call, and they come in and you high five and you walk out, unless they still need security on the scene. But you being there for hours at a time doing that, I think is ridiculous. And that was one of the things in the ER when we started getting on-call social work, because a suicidal patient will, that's a 6 to 9 hour rabbit hole for me.
Wow.
That I can't be doing a lot of other stuff while that's going on, because that takes a lot of my, but the fact that I can go, you feel like you're a danger to yourself, and I can make one phone call and they can come in and do it, and they can talk to the people that place it, and they can be the one that talks to the psych on call and talks to the placement facility. You guys need the same type of resources.
Absolutely. Like you said, police are tasked with so many things. If it's like, if there's not a service for this, if there's not someone to take care of it, it falls on the police.
Yeah.
And there's other people. phrase, jack of all trades, master of none. You need to stay focused on, obviously, be well rounded, be well educated on as many topics as you can, but there's certain baseline important skills and traits that you really need to stay sharp with.
And I would say to any bureaucrat who thinks that police officers should be doing all that stuff, I'd like to take them out to Eddie V's restaurant for a steak, and I would hand them a raw steak, and then I would hand them a Swiss Army knife, and I would say, I want you to prepare. Actually, I'll hand them the cow, and say, I want you to clean and dress that cow, and get the steak, and then prepare it, and then eat it all with this Swiss Army knife, and tell me what that felt like, because that's what your police officers feel like on a daily basis.
I think a lot would agree with you.
Yeah, because a Swiss Army knife is a great thing, and I own several of them, but you don't want to do the whole soup to nuts scenario with that Swiss Army knife. You'd much rather have a skinning knife to dress that animal out, and some proper cooking utensils, and a nice fork and a nice steak knife, and not try to do everything with a Swiss Army knife. And we see the same thing in emergency medicine, because we're the Swiss Army knives of medicine. And they're doing the same thing to us. They want us doing more primary care in our specialty now. They want us getting certified to prescribe Suboxone. And the reasoning being that, hey, a homeless person who's addicted to opiates, they don't ever go to any other doctor. They only go to an emergency medicine physician. They go to the ER when they're in dire straits, when they're OD'd, or when they're dehydrated, or having suicidal thoughts, or whatever it is. Okay, that's great. But I need to have give me a family medicine or an internal medicine doctor who's on call 24/7 that I call, and he gets out of bed or she gets out of bed, and they come to my department and they counsel them and they set them up for their Suboxone, because I'm not going to do it.
It's too much.
It's too much. I'm already doing too much. And mission creep, mission creep is what's making people's belts too heavy. It's what's making your job too challenging. And honestly, between the things that we know that police officers should be doing, which is working out a minimum of 4 times a week, doing jujitsu 2 to 3 times a week, dry firing when they should, and going to the range when they should. And we want them to have time to enjoy their families in between. So adding all these other training requirements on top of it. How many hours a year of computer-based training are you required to do you think?
Oh, well, we get a lot through like an online update system. Yeah. So we don't have to go physically to a classroom to do a whole lot, but
yours is like ours.
Yeah.
So I just did my HIPAA, my conflict of interest, and I don't remember what the other one was. I just had 3 modules that I just had to do last week.
Sit there.
Yeah. So
it's a lot. It's a lot of a lot of information's constantly getting pushed out. Things are constantly being updated, changed.
Yeah.
Having to be retrained and updated. It's a lot of information.
Yeah. But my opinion on a lot of that is everybody knows you don't really absorb anything out of that. You don't. You absolutely don't absorb. Oh, EMTALA, that was the other thing I had to do. You absolutely don't absorb anything out of it. It's not about that. It's about then when you do screw up, them saying, well, it's not our problem.
You signed off on it. You're good. It's
his own individual fault because we gave him the tools. So it's about a blame shift.
Yeah, liability.
Yeah, it's about liability shift. And that's in medicine and law enforcement. In the military, same thing. It's about, when you do, we're going to do a safety stand down, and we're all going to make you sit in a room and listen to a bunch of stuff you already knew. And then 6 months from now, when we have this same type of incident occur again, we can look Congress in the eye and we can say we did everything that we were supposed to do.
They gave you what you needed.
And that was an individual's fault. That's the mishandling of motorcycle safety in DOD was something that was I won't get onto that soapbox, but that was something that bothered me for a real long time. Brother, thank you for being here today, man.
Yeah,
I think good. You put out some excellent information. I hope people will take use of it. Are you on social media? Can people find you on social media? Or do you even care?
I'm on Facebook, Instagram.
Okay.
And so, I think if they take anything from it, just take an honest assessment of your gear, where you're at, where you're working, what you need, what are the chances you're going to need it. How are you training? What should you focus most of your training on? Because it's not the same answer for everyone, right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit different.
I would tell everybody out there, weigh whatever it is you're carrying. Weigh it. And make a pledge to yourself that you're going to eliminate 5% of that weight right now. You're going to turn off this podcast. You're going to weigh your shit, and you're going to make a decision to eliminate 5 to 10% of that weight just based on whatever it is. You know, even if that's as little as going through your keychain and going, I don't have that storage locker anymore, you know, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So something to think about.
Empty those pockets.
I'm going to close today with a quote from Confucius, who said, "The man who moves a mountain begins by carrying away small stones." Remember that. Start eliminating some of those small stones right now, everybody. And until next time, be a sheepdog.
You have been listening to the Sheepdog Project. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Sheepdog Response. The views expressed on this podcast are those of the individual and do not represent any larger entity, public or private.